Shabbat shalom. Good to see you. Shabbat shalom. How you doing? Oh, was that you? I didn't look at it. I saw that someone said it.
If you use a lot of here because of the rain.
Oh, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. No, I appreciate it. It's all good. It's all good.
You walk?
No, I didn't. Hey.
50 on the camera. Really? That was it? I guess it's not the same thing.
No. In a few weeks, though.
When you start doing the next gig,
The first weekend of Earth is the first weekend of July. I'm going to be here for the end of it, so I'm doing 4 more weekends. I don't know. Possibly. I know, Steve City.
yes.
So I spent the first weekend of July, and then I'm off, so I'm going to South Africa for 3 weeks. And then I'm really off. I already lived through it once, so I can do it again. I'm an old man.
One time, I was going to the airport, and all of a sudden the rockets started coming like crazy. They stopped the bus, and they said, stand between the bus and the barrier.
It is.
So in this country, you have to take off the street because you just got me a hellish chance.
Hopefully something will happen.
This can't end fast enough. And is there a way to take away Jewish identity? Because that's sweet to know.
Very nice.
Anyway, all right.
Okay. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat
shalom. Shabbat shalom. Okay. Just a reminder to you to remind me of Omer tonight. So I will endeavor to remember. Hopefully I will.
You do it like after your show.
Yeah, we do it actually after a later. No, before a later. After sermon before a later. Yeah. That's the thing. That's what I meant to say. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Okay. A lot of good energy in the room tonight. Very good. All right, well, we're going to seize on that energy for a moment. Before we get started with our service, since we're already in a talkative mood, No. All right, turn to the people around you, wish each other a Shabbat Shalom, especially if you don't know the people around you, introduce yourself. And Neil added a nice little wrinkle. Maybe you share something nice about the last week that you're bringing into this Shabbat. I think it's a nice wrinkle from Neil, right? A little bit of added meaning. You know, well, we have a Pope from Chicago. We'll get back to the Pope a little bit later. That's good foreshadowing. We like foreshadowing around here. Okay, I can share one very lovely thing. I mean this in all sincerity. I tell people this all the time. I struggle in those moments because I don't want to shush. Actually, what you guys are doing is really wonderful, right? Just catching up with each other, seeing your friends at the end of the week, right? Getting ready for, this is what Shabbat is about, right? That community is what it's all about. You know, we all eventually have to get to the service, but I don't want you to think that this is some punitive response to your otherwise natural and wonderful selves. But, you know, in the vein of what Neil said, right, one really glorious thing that happened I was able to be there on Sunday to see Cantor Lauren, now Cantor Lauren, and Rabbi Aaron become Cantor and Rabbi.
Yeah.
So for those that knew them well in their time with us, what a real treat that was to see. And Will, as part of the choir, sang beautifully.
Tried to.
And I understand for some that tried to watch that it didn't quite.
It stopped.
Yeah, at some point.
Oh, did it?
So yeah, Marcia says it stopped exactly at some point or another.
They sang, Shalom, they sang a song at the end. He sang a song at the end.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
well, we'll figure out the tech, but I promise you there are copious amounts of
There's
video
a recording,
of,
and I'm happy to send
of at
it
the
so
very
that we
least
can,
the section where it happens, where Aaron and Lauren become.
I'll send you the Vimeo.
Okay, good. But in any case, that was a really lovely, wonderful thing, and of course our Yom HaAtzmaut party. So a lot of great things this week. I hope you're coming into this Shabbat with a lot of joy. One other quick word, which is months ago we sort of assumed that this was actually going to be Will's last
Yeah.
Shabbat with us, but as it happens, Will being the wonderful person that he is, he's actually going to come back to be with us during June. So we'll have we're going to look at it as a long farewell, as he said, right? Counting the Omer of saying goodbye to Will over the succeeding weeks. But in any case, we have some nicer food to eat a little bit
Yeah.
later at the Oneg. So I hope you'll stick around, and we'll just enjoy every
Exactly.
time that we have with you,
There we
Will,
go.
for sure. So before we get started with our service, we're going to invite up Ellen Ruby, one of our great leaders and friends here at the temple, especially of our Rosh Chodesh group, is going to light and bless our Shabbat candles. It's found on page 120, and we believe we have our oil candle set working again.
Good.
So Ellen, do you need help with this part, or you feel okay? You got it. I like to feel you. Well, I don't have any experience with that. That's not my. They should calm down. Keep on.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Good Shabbos, Ellen. Thank you so much. So we'll turn now to page 130 as we begin Kabbalat Shabbat together at the very top of the page.
Lechu neronin al Adonai nariya litzur ishenu. Lechu neranina, lechu neranina, lechu neranina al Adonai. Lechu neranina, lechu neranina, lechu neranina al Adonai. Naria, naria, litzur yishenu nekadma vana betoda. Naria, naria, litzur yishenu bizmirot naria lo. Lechu neranina, lechu neranina, lechu neranina al Adonai. Lechu neranina, lechu neranina, lechu neranina al Adonai.
We're now on page 131.
Shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru miyom leyom yeshuato, safru vagoyim kevodo bechol ha'amim nifleotav. Ki gadol Adonai, hulal meod, norahu, al kol Elohim, yai lai lai, ki kol Elohe ha'amim elilim va'adonai, shamayim masa, hod ve'adar lefanav, ותפארת במקדשו, יאי לי 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 לי, יאי לי לי יאי לי יאי לי 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 יאי לי 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 יאי לי לי Shiru שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו.
We're now on page 132, or Zarua.
Or zarua latzadik, uleishrei lev simcha. Or zarua latzadik, uleishrei lev simcha. Simchu tzadikim ba'Adonai, vehodu lezecher kodsho. Simchu tzadikim ba'Adonai, vehodu lezecher kodsho.
We're now on page 134, toward the very top of the page.
Zamru l'Adonai bechinor, bechinor vekol zimra, b'chatzotzrot vekol shofar, haril lifnei hamelech Adonai. Yizamru l'Adonai bechinor, bechinor vekol zimra, b'chatzotzrot vekol shofar, hariu lifnei hamelech Adonai. Yiram hayamum lo, tevel veyoshveva, neharot imcha uchaf yachad, harim yiraneinu. Lifnei Adonai kiva, lishpot haaretz, yishpot tevel betzedek, ve'amnim b'meisharim. Yiram hayamum lo, tevel ve'yoshveva, neharot imcha uchaf yachad, harim yiraneinu.
We're now on page 135, Romamu, which is the last Hebrew paragraph in the middle of the page.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho.
We're now on page 136, Psalm 29, very top of the page.
Mizmor leDavid, Havul Adonai b'nei Elim, Havul Adonai kavod va'oz, Havul Adonai kevod shemo, Ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh, Kol Adonai al hamayim, El hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim, Adonai al mayim rabim. Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover arazim, Vaishaber Adonai et arzei halanon, Vayarkidem kemo egel Levanon veSirion, kemo veneremim, kemo veneremim. Kol Adonai chotze להבות אש. כל אדוני יכיל מדבר, יכיל אדוני מדבר קדש. כל אדוני יכול אלילות, ויחשוף יערות, ובהיכלו כולו מרכבות, כולו מרכבות, כולו מרכבות. אדוני למבול ישב, וישב אדוני מלך לעולם. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום.
We'll turn now to Lecha Dodi, which is on page 138. A reminder, we'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs. And for the final paragraph, we'll rise if we're in the room and face the door as we walked through just a few moments ago.
Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekabla, nekabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekabla, nekabela. Shamor vezachor b'dibur echad, Ishmianu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad u'shmo echad, Leshem u'tiferet ve'litila. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekabla, nekabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekabla, nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki hi mekor haberacha. Merosh mikedem nesucha, sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekabla, nekabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekabla, nekabela. Hitoreri, kiva orech kumiori. Uri, shir daveri, kevod Adonai alaych nigla. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekabla, nekabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekabla, nekabela. Boi veshalom ateret bala, gam besimcha uvtzola. Toch emune am segula, boi chala. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekabla, nekabela. Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, nekabla, nekabela.
Please be seated. Will, not to put you on the spot, but the composer and the era for that one?
Mordechai Ze'ira, 1960s Israel.
See, I knew I could ask him, but he didn't know the answers. It's interesting. I wouldn't have expected Israel, though. I don't know. There was something about that melody. I thought it was more,
It comes from like that old world of like the songs of the land of Israel. Like before the 1970s, when Israeli music became Mizrahi, like when it was still very Ashkenazi influenced, Hasidic influenced.
It's really very cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So we're going to turn now to page 140, Tzadik Tamar, which is just in the middle of the page where it indents.
Tzadik Tamar yifrach kerez balvanon iske shetulim bevet Adonai bechatrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvun beseva deshenim verananim lehagid ki ashar Adonai tzuri velo avlatabo.
Now rise in body or spirit for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144 and remain standing for the Baruch Hu on the next page. Yitkadal veyitkada shemei rabba alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei becha yechonu v'yomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael Magala Magala uvizman kariv veimeru Amen Yeheshmei Rabba mevarach Le'alam li'almei almaya yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudsha richu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'yimeru Amen. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Please be seated. We'll turn now to page 148 as we read together in English toward the bottom of the page. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzvaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening.
Umhavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uvein laila, Adonai Tzebaot Shemo, El Chai v'Kayam, Tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo,
Amari v'Aravi.
Amen. Let's read together now on the bottom of page 151. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol. All these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form?
Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu v'hem nege yomam v'layla ve'avatecha tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael Shema Yisrael Adonai Adonai Echad.
Please join us on page 154.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצאך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Adonai Elohechem Emet. Let's read together now on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. As we turn to page 158, Michamocha.
Yada dai 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 yada dai 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 yada dai 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 mi chamocha bailim Adonai mi kamocha nedar bakodesh norati lo tosefele osefele malchutcha ra'u vanecha okayam livnei Moshe malchutcha ra'u vanecha okayam livnei Miriam zeli anu ve'ameru Adonai imloch leolam leolam va'ed mi chamocha bailim Adonai mi kamocha nedar bakodesh norati lo tosefele osefele v'ne'amar kifad Adonai et Yaakov ugolo miyad chazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai ga'al Yisrael.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Hashkivenu is on the top of page 160.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim ushmor tzeiteinu uvoenu lechaim u'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Baruch atah Adonai ha'porei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim.
Amen. We turn now to page 162 at the very top.
Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam Veshamru Israel et HaShabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
I invite us now to rise in body or spirit as we begin the Amidah together on page 164. From that point on, we'll continue silently. As always, please go at your own pace. When you're finished at the end, if you're still standing, you may be seated.
Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. יחיו לרצון אמרי פי וגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי אדוני צורי וגואלי עושה שלום שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל עושה שלום שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל יושבי תבל, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, אמן, אמן. עושה שלום, שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ועל כל ישראל. Amen.
We'll turn now to page 371 as we offer our Mishaberach, our healing prayer for this evening. In our community tonight, we're thinking of Ronnie Lidowitz, Madeline Egelfeld, Sue Wartor, Abigail Blum, Kate Sherwood, Ame and Warren Cass, Rivka Bat Rachel, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Sylvia Devora Bat Francis, Shelley Newmark, Diane Axelrod, Gabriella Spicer, David Kyle Klopman, Lorraine Davis, Kim Birnbaum, Deborah Block-Kroll, Sylvia Oren, Rachel Bat Ora, Peretz Ben Shlomo, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Jill Fagan, and Stan Posner. In addition to those names that I just shared, if you have additional names to add, we'll start on this side of the room and work towards the back, and then this side. And if you have names to share, just please raise a hand so I don't miss anybody.
Do you have an animal? Do you have an Vargas? Can you ask me on this covered with the way of
The Tipasky family, Diane Schwartz, Maureen Kenny, Maria, Honey Rodman, Judy Lipton, Lauren Ella Rubin, Noel, Mark Newmark, Mary Berger, Dottie, Kevin Major, Karen Eckhart, Lisa Potter, Roz Weinberg, Honey L, and Adrian Berger.
Ella Murad.
Linda Shapiro.
Hachazan Benjamin Ze'ev Ben Rivka Chaya.
Of course, we invite those watching at home to add the names of their loved ones, and we'll join together in the Mishaberach on the middle of page 371.
Mishaberach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Now offer our prayer for Israel in time of war. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, our God and God of our ancestors, you know that the Jewish people are one nation with one heart, and now that heart is broken. O healer of broken hearts, binder of their wounds, be with our brothers and sisters who've been taken captive and with the families of the victims. Watch over the hostages, break their bonds, and bring them out from darkness to light. Proclaim release to the captives, liberation to the imprisoned. Comfort the families, bring them under the shelter of your wings. Bring complete healing of body and spirit to all of the wounded. Bind up our wounds and grant us healing. Tzur Yisrael v'goalo, rock and redeemer of the people Israel. Bless the state of Israel, the initial manifestation of our redemption. Shield it with your care, spread over it your shelter of peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Grace them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend us. Crown their efforts with victory. Bless the land with peace, its inhabitants with lasting joy. Shomer Yisrael, guardian of Israel. Strengthen and bless the defenders of Israel who stand guard on the land, in the air, and on the sea. May we see the promise of the psalmist realized. You turn my mourning into dancing, my sackcloth into robes of joy. God protect, preserve, and restore peace and well-being to Israel, your people, and together we say,
Amen.
Amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone. This is now many years ago, and I can say many years ago because I've been a rabbi for a long enough period of time where I think I can start to speak that way. In the early 2010s, I had the privilege of a summer internship that was sponsored by the Lynn Schusterman Foundation. If you don't know that name at all, the Schusterman Foundation is one of the great Jewish philanthropies. Probably don't know it so much because the Schusterman family comes from, if I'm not mistaken, Omaha, Nebraska. Not the first place you might think of. Oklahoma. Right, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Thank you for correcting. Okay, so the Schusterman Foundation done lots of wonderful things over the years, including supporting a number of institutions that mean a great deal to me. But years ago, they had this sort of brilliant idea to allow money to be available for congregations to hire summer rabbinic interns. Normally, the way that an internship works, other than our community in most cases, is the student works really from the beginning of the academic year to the end of it, and then the summer is a different story altogether. So for the most part, right, you don't have pulpit experiences, but for me, it was really a great opportunity, and I had the privilege of serving at Sharei Tefillah on the Upper East Side. And in that, right, I know, familiar to some of us. And, you know, as is the case, a lot of times when you're an intern, especially in a very large congregation in the city, you don't exactly get a lot of airtime, as it were, right? The intern doesn't generally speaking give the sermon, doesn't do a whole lot in that way. I think I had one sermon that entire summer. So a lot of what I was doing was watching and learning, and the technical term for it is shadowing. And I had this great opportunity over the summer. And I distinctly remember there was one service where we got to the point in which we're about to say the Kaddish, and their practice is very much like our practice, as it is in many congregations, which is you have a list of people that you know you're saying Kaddish for, and then you invite an opportunity for those in the room to share additional names. And so we ran around the room, and everybody shared names of loved ones and things like that. And then at the very end, we got to one gentleman who stood up quite confidently and very genuinely, and he said the name of Michael Jackson to add to the Kaddish list. And, well, so, you know, inevitably, right, the response in the room was a mixture of a lot of different feelings and emotions. And for me, myself, most of you know, I come from a more traditional background. Certainly wasn't used to somebody, certainly of that stature, let alone somebody that's not from within the Jewish community, being acknowledged at that point in the service as part of the Kaddish. And I remember distinctly as a student, right, I had no responsibility in this one way or the other, but you can imagine when we went next door for the oneg, it was the topic of conversation. And I watched as the rabbis and the cantors, they fielded any number of perspectives from the, you know, Ashanda, you know, how could they do this, to I totally understand it. And, you know, again, from every indication that I can tell you, the person who shared that name did it with the absolute sincerity. And from conversations that I overheard, you know, was only from a place, again, of reverence for somebody who clearly in their life, the music of Michael Jackson meant a great deal. And I forget if it was that it was his yahrzeit or that he had just passed, but somewhere in that vicinity where it felt something raw for him, and so that was ultimately shared. And I don't remember exactly what the resolution was, if there was such a thing at the end of it, but it was one of those memories that I kind of tucked away and I didn't really think about until a couple weeks ago when a congregant or a member of our community came up to ask me a question at the end of the service. And the question was, would it have been appropriate to say, or the name of Pope Francis when he passed away? And it was an immediately wonderful question, and one that actually I had only a few hours earlier seen posted in my rabbi's Facebook group because there was a question to another colleague of the similar sort. And so, you know, I thought a lot about it over the last couple of weeks, and I wanted to share with you just a couple of things because I think it's both an interesting intellectual exercise to ask the question and to try to seek an answer. It's also a very, very, very common halachic reality, which is somebody presents a question that there isn't a definitive answer for. How does one approach it? What's the mindset of the rabbi who's trying to answer that question? And I don't know that at the end of it I'm going to give you some comfortable resolution, but I did want to share at least a few things. So the first is just out of curiosity, and I'll put the question to you. Is it, according to halacha, according to Jewish law, is it permissible to say Kaddish for somebody who is not Jewish? How many of you say yes? Yes. Okay, so most of the room say yes. How many of you say no? And if you don't feel comfortable raising your hand is also fine. So I will just tell those that are watching at home, right? The plurality in the room was yes. Okay, it was yes. And to some degree, I think actually that surprised me that all of you felt so confident as to say yes. Because if you think about it, right, Kaddish actually, in its traditional form, is a fairly limited prayer. Technically speaking, the obligation for saying Kaddish is very restricted. Halakhically speaking, right, it's sibling, children, spouse, parents. Right? It's very, very limited. So even if you had a beloved grandfather, grandmother, cousin, dear friend, by halachic standards, the obligation is not upon you to say Kaddish. Okay? However, the answer you should know, and actually from a number of authorities, although I don't imagine all authorities, but a number of authorities, including the late Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who was the chief Sephardic rabbi of the state of Israel for many, many years. His son is, I think, still presently his, right? Oh, no, he's out. Yeah, okay. Complicated, another sermon for another time. All right, but considered to be, again, a posek of renown, somebody whose ruling is going to be considered by the vast majority of Jews living around the world. And the halachic ruling is, yes, in fact, you can say Kaddish for somebody who isn't Jewish. The limitations on it, though, or the thinking on it, is really two things. One, if you're going to do that, you should only do it for someone of a good character, of a good stature, right? You shouldn't say it for somebody who's an Amalek type character, so to speak. Gets a little iffy, okay, because that leaves open a lot of different ways of reading things, right? Even Michael Jackson is a good example of, right? Can have a lot of different conversations about art and artist and the person and all those kinds of things. Okay, the second is that actually the way that the rabbis get to this logic is they say, well, take the situation in which you have somebody who converts to Judaism. Right? When someone converts to Judaism, their parents don't convert with them. So when the inevitable should happen, right, they shouldn't sever their relationship with their parents. That kibud av va'em, the honoring your father and your mother, supersedes any other limitation that halacha may put on a situation like this. Okay? Now here's the added layer of it, though, that I didn't initially think to ask, but I think is relevant here. Can you say Kaddish for somebody that you don't personally know or have any personal connection to? Because I think in some ways, actually, that's the more relevant question. So, for example, if everyone in the room was given the opportunity to say Kaddish for even, again, tangentially related people, significant figures in the literary world, in the world of the arts, right, any number of things, my guess is that a single Shabbos wouldn't go by without a lot of us raising our hands to add people to the list, either people who recently passed away or people, again, who are observing a yard site. There is a certain logistical reality of if we open that door completely wide open, what does that look like, right? If we're saying Kaddish for everyone, does that get complicated? It becomes even more complicated when you have a situation like actually was the case in a lot of Ashkenazi communities for a lot of our history, which is unlike our scenario and most scenarios of today where anyone who's saying Kaddish can say Kaddish, in certain communities it was restricted to one person, right? And it was a bidding war as to who could say Kaddish for their loved one on that particular Shabbat. So then you get into an even more related question, right? Is it proper for someone to say Kaddish for a distant or unrelated person before somebody is able to say Kaddish for their father or their mother or their brother or their sister or so on? Okay, so there are some logical questions there. But I want you to know, though, that having someone else say Kaddish for, let's say, a loved one of yours is very much a thing and actually is something of a expected revenue stream within the yeshiva world. If you yourself, for example, if you've lost someone in the last year and you know that you can't make it to shul 3 times a day, every day for 11 months, you can pay, I believe it was, $280 or something like to that effect, and someone in Israel, in a yeshiva, will say Kaddish for your family each and every day for 11 months. And it is very much, and again, for some of you that may be new information, I will be honest with you, it's something when I learned about, I still struggle with some of the potential negatives of such a reality. But also at the same time, take somebody who, genuinely speaking, wants to honor their parents in a traditional way. They honor a loved one that just passed and can't make it to shul as frequently as someone who otherwise would do that. Here there is some opportunity for the Kaddish still to be said, for yeshiva students to have some parnasa, some ability to, pay their bills. It's something of a system that makes a certain kind of sense. But again, the balance of that is to say that if our approach genuinely and generally was to do that, what would happen? Right? The Kaddish would become meaningless. It would be yet another thing that we farm out to someone else to do for us. And any of us in the room, thank God I haven't had the experience personally, but I have been with many who spent that entire year, right, even on and off, making sure that they were saying Kaddish regularly. Right? If you told them that there was some way for them to put that responsibility on someone else, they would never do it. Right? Because to them, it was a really important part of their grieving process and so on. Right? So there is an added layer of this too, which is the one that I sort of skipped over at the beginning and tended to come back to, which is the question of obligation. To remember that in Jewish law, there is a very significant distinction between your obligation to do something, whether you are not permitted to do something, or whether there simply is no obligation and no one is telling you no. And this happens to be sort of one of those categories, which is to say, there's nothing that is technically inappropriate of that gentleman standing up and saying Kaddish for Michael Jackson all those years ago. There's nothing technically wrong with someone standing up here and saying Kaddish for Pope Francis. Having said that, right, the meta question that we have to consider is that the most appropriate thing? Is that right for us? Is it right even for them? Is there something of an assumption built into it that we feel better having done it because we feel like we need to acknowledge in some significant way a loss that is very significant to millions of people around the world, including, I'm sure, friends of all of yours, friends of mine, people who belong to the Catholic faith who have had, as always is the case at the end of one pope's life and the beginning of another, a roller coaster of emotions, right? The loss of someone significant, someone else coming in. And to act as if none of that has any impact on the world around us or the people that we care about, I think would feel disingenuous also. So while the Kaddish may not necessarily be the right place, I don't want to suggest the idea that we as a people have no either responsibility or opportunity to acknowledge a loss of that significance, right? Especially something like a pope. Now, having said that, we have to keep in mind that the position of pope, again, has been filled by many different people, some of whom who have been genuinely kind and thoughtful towards the Jewish people throughout history, and some who have not. And some actually who were the basis of some truly terrible stuff that happened to our people throughout history. So it's not so simple as to say we should all be happy, sad, have clear emotions about it, what have you. So I thought back to a story, and I had to look it back up again years ago, because the closest thing I could think of in our lifetime where there was a model of some, what I would call authentic and healthy and respectful relationship between religious figures at times like this, or in places in which there needs a certain kind of reflection and I think respect. It's not a situation of death. It's something else, but I'll try to tie it back in. Some of you may have heard the story before. So years ago when then Rabbi Sachs, not yet Lord Rabbi Sachs or Sir Rabbi Sachs, right, it was the chief rabbi of England, went to be knighted by the Queen. Does anybody know what the immediate challenge of that is? Well, I said, what? Wasn't on Shabbat. Luckily, good guess though. Good. Correct. President Ron has the correct answer. Okay, our tradition teaches us that we don't bow before human beings. We bow before God. We do not bow to human beings. It's a big part of us and how we approach things. And so in Rabbi Sachs's case, he was to be knighted by then the Queen of England. Okay, what do you do? What do you do? So the question again is, does one give up of one's own sort of identity and respect for oneself in order to serve some other entity and its respect? And the answer actually was something rather brilliant. They brought in a sort of step stool of sorts so that the queen could step up, be on a higher state than the rabbi, okay, serving her role as the sovereign and in the role of, again, knighting. But Sachs did not have to bow. He could stand as he would have stood otherwise. I'll tell you just as a quick joke, and I don't know whether this is true or a Bubba Mice, but according to Sachs, the queen turned to the senior courtier and asked, "Why is this knight different from all other knights?" Which, if this is a true story, I just think it's such a brilliant, just a sign again of how witty she was, how truly, truly brilliant and witty she was. But to me, why did I tell this story? What does it have to do with the Pope and Kaddish and all these other things? Because to me, that was an example of a much more organic way of sort of finding a way for that respect to exist between the two, right? Where each side is getting a certain acknowledgement of their role and their responsibility and what's important and what lines ought not necessarily be crossed in order to keep some of what is unique and distinguished to be unique and distinguished. And I think if we opened up the Kaddish of all the prayers in particular to say for everyone and anyone, even someone of the stature of the Pope, I don't think that's the most, I think, direct or respectful way to handle that. I don't know what the exact answer is, but what I can tell you is something that I did, and I tend to do in these situations, which is rather than doing something as part of our service or something in that way, or eulogizing the previous Pope or lauding the incoming Pope, was to call the Catholics in my life and both to offer my condolence when Pope Francis passed away and to offer my congratulations when they selected the new Pope Leo the 14th, right? That to me, like that element should be there. That piece should be there. But as far as the Kaddish is concerned, call me a traditionalist in this way, I think one of the ways that we maintain a certain significance for special, even sad special things, is by keeping them distinct, keeping them distinguished in that kind of way. It doesn't mean, by the way, that if you have someone that you're saying Kaddish for in your life that's important to you, I always want you to say that name here. I don't want you to feel like you can't. But I want more to ask the question of yourself is to say, is this the best or only way for me to remember that loved one of mine? Is there some other means or mechanism that maybe is going to be more respectful of them in whatever way I knew them, and also keeping this space and our Kaddish for the people that are, again, either the most directly connected to us, or part of our larger family, as it were. So as I said, I don't know in the end whether it's right or wrong to have said Kaddish for Michael Jackson, whether it would be right or wrong to say Kaddish for the Pope. I'm not even sure our tradition really gives us a definitive answer one way or the other. But what I appreciate and why I wanted to share it tonight, aside from trying to answer what I thought was a great question, is to give you, again, an insight into the mind of the way that Jewish thought works and way that halacha works. That very rarely is it a yes, no, this is a terrible thing, this is a right thing. But more, what is the question? And most likely, what are the questions that we have to consider? And we may come to different conclusions at the end, but the asking the questions part is key. And if we just let these moments kind of slide by, I don't think that we grow from it. I don't think we resolve anything. And in the end, I don't think that we actually show the proper kind of respect that we ought to. So most likely, I've at least done what I did all those other years ago, except now I'm the rabbi, which is giving lots of people things to talk about at the oneg afterwards. So you can come to me, and I'll attempt to give you a little bit of my thought process. But with that, I wish you all very much a Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
And we'll now turn to page 570, and we'll rise as we mark the counting of the Omer. Again, counting the days between Pesach and upcoming holiday of Shavuot. And just get my page here. Okay, I got it. Thank you. Yep. Okay. Hineni mukhan umezuman lekayem mitzvat aseh shel svirat haomer. I am ready to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al svirat haomer. Hayom shiva be'esrim yom shehem shlosha shavuot v'shisha yamim laomer. Today marks 27 days, which is 3 weeks and 6 days of the Omer. We remain standing as we turn to page 586, Aleinu L'Shabbat.
Aleinu l'shabbat l'adon hakol, l'teit gidula liyotzeh bereshit, shelo asanu kigoyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu kimishpechot ha'adama, shelo samt chelkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim u'mishtachrim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu.
Page 591.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Ask those in mourning, those observing our site to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated at this time. We think first of those who passed in our community in recent months. Heather Abrams, David Amanoff, Stephen Dickman, Judith Barry Emanuel, Harry Fadum, Michael Fagenbaum, Sharon Goldblatt, Barbara Goldfarb, Harry Heller, David Carlin, Morris Kramer, Ann Lieber, Jeanette Myrowitz, Jeffrey Miller, Phyllis Rowan, Gloria Sapiro, Ronald Tempowski, Randy Wasserman, and Joel Wintner. We also mark the art sites that occurred during the last week for Bernard Baumstein, William Bennett, Evelyn Block, Irving Cassell, Rose Kopelman, Henry Decker, Leon Fagan, Ilsa Fowler, Bob Fisher, Clara Fleischer, Evelyn Gelb, Lorraine Haber, Teresa Jacoby, Robert Jonas, Irving Kellman, my beloved grandmother, Molly Kessler, Morris Chris, Alana Lager, Maria Lemos, Howard Mazel, Danny Peskowitz, Dorothy Raich, Carol Reagan, Robert Saltzman, Lillian Saperstein, Jesse Siegel, Pearl Soroka, Martha Spitzer, Amy Stevens, Beatrice Tarlow, and Martin Weiss. In addition to those names that I just shared, if anyone is saying Kaddish for anyone else that you'd like to mention? I'll invite those at home, if you have additional names to share. I'll ask the mourners to join me on page 598, and if it's your custom, you may rise alongside them at this time. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael b'agala b'zman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shemei rabba mebarach la'alam u'li'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Gehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, please be seated. So while I'm on the topic of Kaddish, just one other interesting thing that I learned, which I'd always wondered about. The Kaddish is, for those that don't know, the mourner's Kaddish, Kaddish Yatom, is one variation of the Kaddish, of which there are many. They serve different purposes. Kaddish Yatom doesn't mention death or dying or anything of the sort. And on a normal service, the variations of the Kaddish, I think I was told, is a minimum of 13 times in a service. In our case, we do the Chatzi Kaddish, we do the mourner's Kaddish, and that's it. But traditionally, there is also the full Kaddish, the Kaddish Shalem, there's Kaddish D'Rabbanan in the earlier part of the service. So there's a lot of things ultimately going on. But the strangeness of it is that unlike the vast majority of our liturgy, it is primarily not in Hebrew. Right? Does everybody know what language it's very good. So why Aramaic? Why would they choose this particular prayer that repeats itself so many times in the service to be in Aramaic when everything else is in Hebrew? Say it louder, Margaret. Very good. Right, Aramaic for the vast majority of Jews for a long period of history was the lingua franca, at least of the sort of, the study of Judaism as it is. They wanted to make sure that this was a prayer that, the average person could say, so that there was, again, a certain unifying element to it. So while it actually is tricky for us now, historically would have been significantly easier for people to say than the rest of the service. So, fascinating things. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, but we'll save some material for another sermon, another night. So, few announcements. Of course, to join us next door for our Oneg Shabbat, which, as I said, will be the first of perhaps several different opportunities to say a very long goodbye to Will. And as we say in Hebrew, this great thing, lehitraot is the way that you will say goodbye more often than in a formal way. And lehitraot is a reflex. It implies you will see them again. Yeah. Right? And that's always been our enjoyment here, that whenever we say goodbye to our students, we know it's not really goodbye. And you'll be at Rodef, so if you're in the city, you can go see him. Also, next year you have permission, only every once in a while, to go see Will, cheer him on, give him a big hug. But in the meantime, we appreciate you, Will, and we hope that you like sushi and cake, because we're going to have sushi and cake next door, which is great. Just a reminder also to join us for Shabbat services beginning tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, followed by a Kiddush and, of course, Torah study at noon. A reminder that our ongoing Leiled Minyan will meet on Sundays at 9:30, but I believe the change has now been to once a month as opposed to every week, and it'll be the first Sunday, I should say, of every month going forward, so we'll send announcements out But again, it's just shifting from a weekly to a monthly piece. Now, next very important announcement, tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. Will, maybe you can tell us a little bit what's
Sure.
happening here.
Sure. So tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at the temple, Ari Weller and I are going to be leading a Nigun circle and Havdalah, and we're going to be taking some wordless melodies that we're going to explore in a way that integrates into mindfulness. We're also going to be taking some words from our liturgy and words from our sacred texts that you know and setting them to Nigunim and exploring how they can influence this liminal moment in our week when the Kodesh turns to the whole, when the holy turns to the ordinary, and how we can perhaps bring a spark of that into our whole, into the week, into the ordinary.
That's fantastic. So you can join us here again tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. Also, this coming week, we are filming the classic Israeli film Salach Shabbati. I don't know if they still show it to you.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. This is part of the curriculum at HUC in your year in Israel is to show this film.
Yeah.
How many of you have seen it, just out of curiosity? Yeah. If you've seen it, it probably was a very long time ago. I always forget the famous actor. It's Topol. Yeah. So the importance of this film, just as a quick 30 seconds, it deals with a part of Israel's history that is sometimes and not accidentally overlooked. And it primarily deals with what happened with Jews who weren't coming from, the Ashkenazi world, but were coming generally from the Mizrahi world in particular, coming from Jews, from Arab lands and so on. And that many of them were put into what are called ma'abarot, which, for lack of a better term, is a transit camp. It was, again, not a pleasant experience, a place for them to be until they could eventually settle into lives in real homes and real places all over the country. But it's a part of the history of Israel that is sometimes a whispered part, and the relationship, again, between the Ashkenazi communities and the Sephardi Mizrahi communities and those that are non-Ashkenazi in general, is not as simple as we might think it is from a distance. And so it's a brilliant film, it's a slower film, it's a black and white film, it takes a little bit of thought, but actually it is, to me, it's required viewing, right? If you really, really care about Israel, you want to understand its history, this is one of those films that I think every Israeli at some point in their life sees. It's worth seeing here. So I hope you'll join us again this Thursday, but please do RSVP to let us know, and we'll serve some Israeli wine and hummus afterwards to enjoy it together. Salach Shabbati. Salach Shabbati. Okay, two other quick announcements. One is at the very end of the month, I believe it's the 30th and the 31st. We're very, very excited that our Women's Torah scholar for this year, our Torah study will be led, and our whole Shabbat will be led by one of my favorite people, one of my beloved professors, Rabbi Dr. Wendy Zierler from the Hebrew Union College. So she will be with us again Friday night and Saturday, and she's going to teach a number of really wonderful things. We're going back and forth on a few of the potential of the topics. But as I spoke about last week, aside from the fact that I have a personal feeling towards her as one of my teachers, she is one of the preeminent thinkers and professors and writers and just all-around brilliant people that I've ever met in my life. So please, 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 especially when we have guests that come to town, it's really important that as a community we show up, not only to show our respect for them, but I promise you, we don't bring people here who there isn't the reason why. And I think she's going to bring a lot of beautiful Torah in a lot of different ways, and to highlight again what is one of the great things about this temple, our Women's Torah Commentary Torah Study. And I want to thank in the room right now, of course, Margaret and Leah and Ruth if she's watching, and everybody who's participated over the years that we have done it. I think it's going to be a really wonderful Shabbaton and a great chance to learn. And as one last word, it's not information here, but Ruth Joseph's book group, while we're talking about Ruth, we'll be meeting again for the summer. Please do contact Ruth if you're interested in joining. It's a great, great opportunity to learn.
What time is that service going to start?
That service is after Memorial Day, so that service will be at 6:30. Yes, you're welcome. Right? Yes. We're not opening that can of worms again. That's 6:30. That's what it is. Excellent. Mark, did you have something? Or you just okay.
Well, and just as a second plug,
Yeah.
Rabbi Dr. Wendy Zierler is an amazing teacher of Torah, and I've not had the chance to take an HUC class with her, but I've had one-off shiurim with her, and she is very, very brilliant, and I think that you will all very much enjoy her.
See, you got Will's approval. This is it.
She's a Canadian of
And
note.
she is a Canadian, of
She's
course.
a Canadian
She
of
is a
note.
Canadian.
We're going to finish today on page 142 with Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon. Kadosh Baruch Hu. Bochem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu ni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Please rise for Kiddush, page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam b'horei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav b'ratzavanu v'shabahat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon inchilanu zikaron lema'aseh bereshit ki hu yom techila lemikraei kodesh zecher letziat Mitzrayim. Ivanu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol hamim, ve'shabat kodshecha, ve'ahava uvratzon inchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh haShabbat.
Amen. L'chaim.
Chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam
Hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Who's come next door?
Decent.
Decent.
Decent. Not bad.
Decent. I think.
We've had significant divorce.
I think. Yes, we have. Yes, we really have. Yes, we really